So we're going to look at how this deity, YHVH, enters the south, specifically Jerusalem. YHVH's identity has been entwined with the ark since biblical times. Now, ark in Hebrew is aron, which means a box or a chest. That's what it simply means. The ark was a revered symbol which over time was renamed to be known as the Ark of Covenant, Aron Habrit, the Ark of Covenant. This original title may have simply referred to it being Ark of YHVH, that is YHVH's sacred vessel. Now, this ark was housed in the temple at Shiloh, as we demonstrated already. So, how did this ark of YHVH get to Jerusalem? It's been said and believed by many that the ark of the covenant had been constructed at Mount Sinai during its associated mobile sanctuaries construction. Recent discoveries tell a different story, though. The book of Joshua records an early view that priests carried this artifact when conquering lands. And later on, both books of Samuel, that is 1 Samuel 4-6 or 4-7, and 2 Samuel 6, both Samuel feature regular appearance in verses called in scholarship the Ark narrative. It disappeared completely from the book of Judges. So how did the Ark and the deity in the Ark get to Jerusalem? I repeat that, and you did hear me right. How did the Ark and then the deity in the Ark get to Jerusalem? Let's summarize it. The story of the Ark's incredible journey is captured in two parts throughout the book of Samuel. The first describes its transfer from Shiloh to Kiriat Jearim, while the second recounts David bringing the ark from Kiriat Jearim to Jerusalem. A fascinating tale that continues to captivate readers today. Let's look at the first leg, from Shiloh to Kiriat Jearim. Upon the great battle between Israel and Philistia at Ebenezer, YHVH's ark was taken captive to Ashdod. The captors made a home for their newfound relic by placing it in the temple of Dagon. After enduring a series of plagues, the Philistines thought it best to return the acquired relic, the Ark of YHVH, to Beth Shemesh, which was an Israelite territory. But upon arriving in Beth Shemesh, the locals also experienced further damages due to them not being familiar with how such an artifact was to be treated. So the locals decided that its resting place would be better suited at Kiriat Jearim in Abinadab's household, entrusting his son Eleazar as its caretaker. This is what we read in 1 Samuel 7. The men of Kiriat Jearim came and took up the ark of YHVH and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, which tells us that this was a temple. And they consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge of the ark of YHVH. So the ark is brought to a temple. It's important, which has a priest taking care of it. That is why when it gets here, everything is peaceful. Now let's look at the name of this place. In Arabic, this place is called Deir el-Azhar, the monastery of El-Azhar. And there's a remarkable archaeological site with an impressive history of preserving the Greek Byzantine monastery that once stood here. So you would notice that Eliezer's name plays off Deir el-Azhar, Eliezer, Deir el-Azhar, commemorating the priest who was in charge of the ark. Okay, we are told the ark is here for a long time, 20 plus years, according to the text. So this is how the ark ends up at Kiriat Jearim when it leaves Shiloh. This is the first leg of the journey of how YHVH entered into the south, entered into Jerusalem. Now, before we look at the second leg, let's look at what was in the box. This box, this aron, this chest, this ark, what was in it? Exodus 25 gives us the dimensions of the box. It says it's 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. These are the measurements in centimeters and then inches. Now, the book of Deuteronomy comes to tell us what seems to be in the ark. And in telling us what was in the ark, it reveals something to us. Knowing the background this is coming off from the ancient Near East. What does Deuteronomy 10 tell us? Thereupon YHVH said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone. Put that in your spirit. They are stones. They are stones, like the first. And come up to me on the mountain and make an ark of wood. I will inscribe on the tablets the commandments that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you shall deposit them in the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. So the ark, as we have read, was a box within which were kept the 2 tablets of the law. Now, these 2 verses that we've read, the one from Exodus and then this one from Deuteronomy, are very late texts. They're very late. There is something being carved and put into the box. This is what we get here. We know the dimensions, and there's something being carved to put into the box. Now, historically, we know the Exodus out of Egypt as narrated by the biblical text, and the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai is not historical, it's legend. So what is the tradition behind this legend? Now we have the book of Kings tell us this. 1 Kings 8. There was nothing inside the ark but the 2 tablets of stone which Moshe placed there at Horeb. Now you will notice that this verse is apologetic. We can clearly observe that there is an apologetic tone in arriving at the same conclusion we get from the verses that we've just read in the book of Deuteronomy. Why does the author need to tell me that there was nothing in the ark but the 2 tablets of stone? It means that there was something in the ark, that the two tablets of stone is replacing. Through these texts, it appears that the tablets of the law were meant to stand in place of something. What were they standing in place of? From the background of the ancient Near East, it would have been two holy stones commonly found among pre-Islamic Bedouins. These are called beetles. We do have records where some chests had symbols for just one deity. So it doesn't have to be two. It seemed likely that Moshe's ark carried either two beetles or figures symbolizing YHVH and his female partner Asherah, or maybe a single entity could have been represented as well. It doesn't always have to be two, like I said. This is not new. This has been repeated as well. In some Arab circles, two powerful goddesses were worshipped. Over time, they may have fell out of favor when they were replaced by copies of the Quran. So this was what was in the ark of YHVH. Beetles, a roughly shaped stone held sacred or worshipped as of divine origins. Okay, now to the next leg of the process of entering into Jerusalem. This deity or this box carrying these stones coming into Jerusalem. What do we know about Jerusalem? Know what you have been told. David's storied history of conquering Jerusalem might be a bit exaggerated. Why do I say that? Prior to his arrival, this city was merely a small settlement, hardly the major accomplishment that many portray it as. By contrast, the fortified city of Kiriat was minuscule compared to its contemporaries, only 2.3 hectares. In comparison, Ashkelon and Ekron span 50 to 60 and 20 hectares, respectively. And Jerusalem measured 4 to 6 hectares at this time. So this begs an intriguing question. If David, according to the biblical text, had successfully repelled Philistines from his kingdom, why hadn't he chosen one of these larger cities as his capital? I think it's a fair question to ask. The answer lies in a much more complex relationship between him and the Philistines, likely indicating that he remained a Philistine vassal during his reign. Jerusalem has been around for centuries, with its enigmatic name stemming from the ancient god of dusk, Shiloh, an ancient Canaanite god associated with dusk, a Ugaritic god of dusk mentioned in ancient texts. So Jerusalem would then mean foundation of this deity. Shalem. Geological evidence suggests that this site has been inhabited since at least 3100 BCE, because it is at this time that one finds the first traces of a wall. Records from Akkadian texts show that the town was a province of Egypt, ruled by a petty king called Abdi Heba in the 4th century BCE, who sent complaints regarding attacks launched by the Apiru. However, Jerusalem experienced a decline later on, which enabled David to conquer it effortlessly. Again, Jerusalem was under the control of Abdi Heba during 14th century BCE, as evidenced by the El Amarna correspondence between him and pharaohs at that time, complaining about raids conducted by the Apiru. This historical backdrop set up conditions which allowed David to take control relatively effortlessly later on in its history. The decline this Canaanite town went into is what enabled David to conquer Jerusalem effortlessly. This is what I'm saying. At the time of David and Solomon, Jerusalem would have consisted only of a small settlement, very insignificant place. So this is just a little background about Jerusalem. Now David arrives at Kiriat Jearim to bring the ark to Jerusalem. Many have not noticed that David's arrival in Kiriat Jearim to bring the ark to Jerusalem is marked by a festive procession, rife with sexual and erotic symbols. I have a question for you. Why was Michal's punishment infertility? Ponder on that for a second. Whatever Michal did, why was her punishment infertility? Let's read the narrative in 2 Samuel 6. As the ark of YHVH came into the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before YHVH, and she despised him in her heart. What is happening here? David is in an ecstatic trance. He's in ecstasy. This is what is happening here. He's leaping and dancing before YHVH. He's in an ecstatic trance. Let's continue. And they brought in the ark of YHVH and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before YHVH. And when David had finished offering the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of YHVH of hosts, and distributed among all the people, the whole multitude of Israel, both men and women, a cake of bread, a portion of meat, and a cake of raisin to each one. Then all the people departed, each to his house. And David returned to bless his household. But Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants, female servants." Uncovering himself before the eyes of his servants, female servants. Female servants is key. Female servants, it's important. and as one of the vulgar fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. And David said to Michal, it was before YHVH who chose me above your father and above all his house to appoint me as prince over Israel, the people of YHVH, and I will celebrate before YHVH. Pay attention closely here. I will make myself yet more contemptible than this, and I will be abased in your eyes. I think the Septuagint has in my eyes. But by the female servants of whom you have spoken, by them I shall be held in honor. What is he talking about? Well, the fertility ritual is commemorated with a sexual union. So you won't honor me, then these female servants, they will honor me. What was her punishment? And Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child to the day of her death, because this was a fertility ritual and is commemorated with a sexual union. This is why he's wearing the ephod. The ephod is like a corset. It just covers your top. It doesn't cover your whole body. It's an outer garment. It's not a garment. It's an outer relic that is worn over your garments. David is wearing only the ephod, and he's in a trance. He's in an ecstatic trance. And when he gets home to bless his family, Michal approaches him with this, and her punishment, because it was a fertility ritual, was that she will become infertile. So, why was Michal's punishment infertility? Well, when David's wife Michal chides him for dancing naked, wearing only an ephod, her punishment points to its significance as it renders her infertile, ultimately emphasizing how essential this ceremony was for fertility purposes. So, YHVH's transfer to Jerusalem was seen as a significant event, exemplifying the themes of fertility and sexuality. This would have been especially pertinent given that YHVH is sometimes considered in relation to Baal, an ancient deity associated with stormy weather and fertility. YHVH is also a storm god, just as Baal is a storm god. They are associated together. So, since the transfer of the ark signifies the entrance of YHVH into Jerusalem, then these themes of fertility and sexuality would not be at all surprising, especially when YHVH is conceived of as a god of storms on the model of Baal, who was considered a fertility deity. I always say that you should have read the book of First Samuel before you get to the book of Second Samuel, because you would notice that Saul had a similar experience with this deity. David and Saul's relationship with this deity is highlighted in 1 Samuel 19, a story which speaks of how, when chasing David, King Saul encountered a group of prophets and he was cast into this same ecstatic, tranced state that made him do what? He disrobed himself to the point he was naked for 24 hours. So this is not new. So to clean this up, some more recent priestly texts prohibits priests from showing their sexual organs. Why the prohibition? Because this was what was done before them. The tradition that they are trying to clean up, because of their quest for monotheism, because of their quest to be different, cleaned up and said, priests are prohibited from showing their sexual organs. So we are clear what was happening here. We shall continue with this process of the deity leaving Kiriat Jearim to Jerusalem in the next video. There is more to talk about on what is happening here. Sit tight for the next video.